Welcome to the last episode of Talking Tactics for this year. 2023 is almost at its end, and we can't say that we will miss it. It was a tough one for considerable parts of humanity. 183 armed conflicts are raging right now. There were many floods and earthquakes, but especially for Ukraine, this was a really hard 365 days to get through. Let's go through some pivotal points. Terror from the sky. The year began almost as dark as its ending, with Russia continuously targeting critical infrastructure. There were times when here in the capital Kyiv, we had no electricity at all. Sometimes it was 4 hours on, 4 hours off. In other regions, the situation was even worse. From January to October 2023, Russia had already sent over 2,800 Shahid-type suicide drones to Ukraine. That number increased to over 3,000 in the past months. Depending on the models, that would mean drones worth 40 to 100 million US dollars, or the approximate pensions of 200 to 500,000 Russians. According to the armed forces of Ukraine, that constitutes a six-fold rise compared to 2022. The same goes for cruise missiles. Over 3,000 were launched at this country in 2023, with a worth of over 23 billion US dollars. At the same time, this terror from the sky is being supported by over 400 multinational companies who were, and some still are, despite all sanctions, doing business with Russia. Some are even sending technology that is vital for the production of advanced weapons. We did an episode about that last April, and surprisingly, nothing changed. But it's not only about supplying Russia with technology. Also, during the first 7 months of 2023, the EU imported around 40% more liquefied natural gas from Russia than before the full-scale invasion. Bakhmut and Prigozhin. Anyway, back to Ukraine. After being forced out of a lot of occupied territory in the south and east of the country in the end of 2022, the Kremlin began Operation Meat Grinder, throwing waves of soldiers and mercenaries at the Ukrainian city of Bakhmut. Bakhmut, which today has been reduced to rubble, held out for months and was dubbed the fortress until it fell into the hands of the Wagner PMC in May. Wagner, that was a whole different level of freak show, with Yevgeny Prigozhin really managing to drive everyone close to madness, even his own people. The world, and we here, watched in disbelief as this band of mercenaries, which for years did everything to operate more in the shadows, suddenly took such a pivotal and central role. But that didn't work. The power struggle between Prigozhin and the defense ministry continuously intensifying, with Prigozhin pushing his luck when he started openly insulting Russia's military leadership. His coup attempt ended just as fast and bizarre as it began, and in August, after the crash of his private jet, Prigozhin most likely met his fiery end. Anyway, to call the end of the Prigozhin madness tragic is a bit of an overstatement. Besides, no one knows if what would have happened if the coup had been successful would have been any better. Still, the conflict between the Ministry of Defense and Prigozhin revealed really deep rifts in the Russian military world, rifts that for now seem to have at least temporarily resolved, with Putin entering 2024 poised for phony re-election. With Avdiivka, he has set his sight on the next target that he wants to sell as a successful liberation. But Ukraine is holding on to the city, although there already isn't much left of it thanks to Russian bombardment. Weapons, weapons, weapons. Ukraine's top brass spent the last winter and spring ferociously gathering aid from its partners. And although it was usually met with hesitance and resistance at first, slowly but surely the promises kept building up. First, Challenger tanks from Great Britain, Leopards, IFVs like the Bradley and the Marder, French reconnaissance tanks, new air defense systems like the Patriot, the promise of F-16s, in October, finally the ATACMs, and much more. Parallel to that, Ukraine was and still is expanding its own weapons industry, building and developing new systems from drones to missiles. The counteroffensive. All the while, Russia was preparing its defenses, blowing up the Kahhovka dam in June, causing massive flooding, upgrading its warfaring technologies and doctrines, recruiting tens of thousands of new soldiers, digging trenches hundreds if not thousands of kilometers long, laying hundreds of thousands of mines. Ukraine, by the way, with an estimated over 30%, is now the world's most mined country. Then, when Ukraine launched its long-awaited offensive in June, initial success was met by the harsh reality. Russia had prepared well. Putin's army no longer was a completely chaotic force fighting with outdated doctrines. The future. As a result, since August, the front line has hardly moved. In some areas, like around Kreminna, around Bakhmut and Avdiivka, Russia is on the offensive once again. The amount of destruction is massive. According to statistics published by the Kyiv School of Economics in October, Russia has caused over 151 billion US dollars worth of damage to Ukrainian infrastructure. That doesn't include the last 3 months of this year, the emotional pain, and most of all, the long-term damages that will result from the destruction of roads, schools, and factories. That final number we will only know when the war is over. The same goes for the dead. What we know is that the total number of deaths in this war from all sides is already in the hundreds of thousands. If nothing changes, it will hit 1 million. As a result, calls for some sort of ceasefire or peace deal have been getting louder. But how do you negotiate peace when the enemy is occupying your land, kidnapping your children, and shooting at your families? What kind of peace is possible with Russia? And yes, expectations for the counteroffensive were high, something that we as a media also contributed to. And although we, pretty early, just 2 weeks after its start, made an episode about why the offensive is going so slow, we admit that maybe we also played a part in raising these expectations and hopes. That's just how it is. Large parts of the country had this euphoria, this anticipation, this hope, however unrealistic in hindsight, that soon Ukraine will be free, entirely free. If you call that naive, then perhaps you're right. But if you ever have been here during the war, if you have ever felt what it's like to be on the front line, or to be attacked in the night by missiles and drones, to have the phone ring and someone telling you that someone you recently spoke to is dead, then I guess it is hard to blame people for getting their hopes up. Still, we made some mistakes this year. For example, in a video we mistakenly mentioned the Leopard 1 was created as the result of a joint project with the USA, but that was the Leopard 2. Thanks for pointing that out. And some things, although correct, we could have done better. This project is just a work in progress, and be sure we read your comments. At this point, a special shout out to Geo Sustainable and the Eastern Canadian household. And also thanks to all others for watching, commenting, and sometimes pointing out the obvious. We will enter 2024 with a lot of uncertainties, a lot of questions. The most important of all, what will happen? Most likely, the war will continue for some time as a combination of a deadly war of attrition together with an arms race. Ukraine just signed a memorandum regarding joint weapons productions with the USA. New factories are opening up here, for example in cooperation with German defense giant Rheinmetall, and both the USA and many EU countries have vowed to step up their production at home. The first side in this war able to gather enough material to launch another full-blown push will probably be able to tip the scales in their favor, which will essentially determine what happens next. According to the New York Times, the US government is pushing Ukraine to consolidate positions and build up Ukrainian forces. The goal being to create enough of a credible threat that Russia might consider engaging in meaningful negotiations at the end of next year or in 2025. The declared goal of President Zelensky for 2024 is to deprive Russia of air superiority and disrupt its offensive operations. Whatever happens, the fight is not over. And it's not over because Russia is still on Ukrainian land, attacking every day. But if you think Ukrainians give up that easily, think again. The hardships this country has faced are much older than February 22, and still, after everything that has happened, the country exists. It exists because of the hundreds of thousands of people risking their lives. So, although these are dark times, we will not let Putin steal the opportunity to celebrate and appreciate each other a little. But more than anything else, we wanted to use this opportunity to say thank you. First and foremost to the armed forces of Ukraine, but also all the doctors, rescue workers, volunteers, journalists, communal workers, truck drivers, everyone who is involved in keeping this country running. Also, this show is only possible because of the tireless work of people behind the scenes who have produced videos almost every single week this year without holidays. So, thank you to video editor, to cameraman, to motion designer, producer, and to wife, and many more behind the scenes who are working tirelessly to make Ukraine a better and safer place to live. Thanks also really to you, our audience, for watching United 24 Media and Talking Tactics. Thank you for your patience, your attention, your comments, and most of all, your support. Have a good New Year's Eve, and may you have an even better 2024. We wish you only the best. Cheers.